Jenna Kutcher put up this carousel where she shared a few slides about why she stayed silent so far and why she's speaking up now. And immediately she faced backlash. I actually first saw the backlash on Threads and I was like, well, what's this? And then I went and found the post.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper.
This episode is going to be different, personal, a little bit messy. But if you have ever felt paralyzed by the fear of saying the wrong thing or even saying the right thing in the wrong way, this episode is for you. If you're new here, welcome to My Rejection Story. You belong here. This is a space for brave questions, imperfect truth-telling. It's what I do with my guests. It's what I do with myself. I try. And I'm really happy to have you because you hit play today. I know that you care. You care about the world. You care about doing what's right. And you care about not letting fear decide whether or not you're going to be silenced. So, if you are chronically online, like I am, then you saw a few days ago that Jenna Kutcher made a statement about ending the forced starvation for Palestinians in Gaza. Mic drop. What? What is happening? So for background context, I have been in support of a free Palestine since long before October 7. I am a history major. I did history in university. I first studied Palestine in high school when I was doing my matric exams. I kind of thought it was common knowledge that, Palestine should be free. But then I realized that not everyone knew the history. And when October 7 happened, a lot of people didn't know any history. They only knew what had happened on October 7 to Israelis, which, by the way, is terrible. If anyone is listening and they think that I support people dying, I do not. I think that any death is too many deaths. So I just wanted that on the record. But yeah, I was just shocked that, how ahistorical so many people's takes were. And back to the context. So if you are online, you would have seen that Jenna Kutcher put up this carousel where she shared a few slides about why she stayed silent so far and why she's speaking up now. And immediately she faced backlash. I actually first saw the backlash on Threads and I was like, well, what's this? And then I went and found the post. And the backlash was from pro-Palestinians. It was from people who support ending the genocide, but they were really angry. They were angry because she censored herself in this post, that her post didn't link to resources, to aid charities, that she spoke about all the reasons why she had not spoken up yet. And the accusation was that she was being performative. When I read this, I had a lot of feelings. My initial gut reaction was, hey guys, at least she's saying something. Like, she has 1 million followers. Don't attack her. We need every voice in this movement. The goal right now is end the genocide. We'll keep notes and come back to people later. Like, that was my initial thought. So I was immediately worried about any negative repercussions of getting angry. I was like, what if she stays silent now because she is too scared of not getting it right? What if a ton of other people are reading the comment section and they're like, shit, I'm not going to speak up because I'm going to get attacked. And I'm just kind of on the school of thought of like, let's focus on the biggest priority, which is to get as many people in this movement as possible so that we can pressurize the US government to stop sending arms and fucking money and everything to the Israeli government so that we can end the genocide, so that we can I don't like thinking of the visceral stuff, but so that people aren't starving to death. I don't know if you have seen the pictures in the media, but it's harrowing. And wish for a world in which there is no forced starvation. I mean, I feel like that should be the bare fucking minimum. Anyway, back to the point. That was my initial reaction, was like, can we please be nice and welcome people to the movement so that the movement can go as far as possible and, you know, we're not fighting each other within it. I also get the anger. I get people's feelings. So I get people feeling upset because they put so much on the line so long ago and, you know, they didn't have the power and privilege that she has. I trust me, I get it. I was posting all over Instagram in the months following October 7, and I thought at any minute now, some of my clients could fire me. They didn't, but you know, you wonder, did people decide not to work with me because they saw my posts? Were they considering working with me? And then I also have such strong convictions that I was like, I don't want to work with them. But then also, like, I have a team to pay, and I know holding all those contradictions is difficult. I said no to some work because it was an Israeli company, and I just didn't. I just couldn't endorse like any Israeli entity, and you know, but also it's scary because you're like, there's so many different things you're weighing up, which is like, what gives me the most influence? Having money, having power, or being morally correct all the time? And I don't know the answer. So if you're listening to this episode thinking I'm going to tell you the answer to be a perfect activist, I'm not going to tell it to you because I haven't cracked it. And if you have, you can let me know. But here's what I do know. I think that activism is rejection prone. I think that if you are going to be an activist in any shape or capacity, you are going to face some form of rejection. I have seen it in all forms of activism that I've been involved in my lifetime. So going back to student protests where we were protesting rape culture on campus, then we were protesting fees falling so that students could access an education, to Black Lives Matter. If it is touching on systems of oppression, if it is touching on the personal, being political, like the most vital things, if it is touching on human life, whether someone deserves to live or die, there is no way that you're going to get it 100% right at all times, especially if you do not have the lived experience. So if you are not Palestinian, if you are speaking out on the genocide and you are raising awareness, you are not going to get it 100% right. And I have seen so many people expect to get it 100% right, to expect of themselves. And I have within myself, and I don't have a big platform. I don't have 1 million people looking at my Instagram post. So there's a lot more room for me to not get it right because people aren't holding me to the standard that they will hold you to if you're in a position of power. So I just want to say that in relation to rejection, this podcast is called My Rejection Story. What I want to talk about is activism and rejection, not getting it right, and what we do with this. Does this mean that we don't say anything? Which, by the way, is another form of not getting it right, especially if you're in a position of power. I think that people can look back and see who was speaking and not getting it right, but at least they were doing something, and who was saying nothing. So I don't think that there is any way out of not getting it right, especially if you have branded yourself as an activist of some sort, if you have built a brand that is aligned to making the world a better place. People are expecting something often, and not saying anything can also be a form of not getting it right. Saying something will also be a form of not getting it right to many people. With something like this, as polarizing as this, there is absolutely no position you can take that will not piss some people off. So that is why, and I'm going to get into this later, it's about understanding yourself, your values, and what you can live with. Before I get into that, I want to talk about fear, because I think that fear is what keeps us frozen. It's why we often go quiet and stay in the sidelines. So neuroscience really backs this up. There's research published in Science, which I will link below. Social rejection activates the same part of the brain as physical pain. It is painful, it sucks, it hurts. It activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Wow, that's a mouthful. And if you are doing everything you can to avoid feeling physically in pain, I understand. I get it. Like, me too. I also try avoid pain. So getting criticized for speaking up literally feels like a punch to the gut. Neurologically, it is. Dr. Matthew Lieberman, who's a social scientist at UCLA, says that we are wired so that our well-being depends on our connections with others. So if you view speaking up as threatening your connection with others, it's understandable why that would bring so much resistance. When we risk rejection from a group, and even if it's a digital one, we sense danger. Not just discomforts, a shit ton of discomfort. I can point to some examples where I felt this on a very micro level. So if we go back to Black Lives Matter 2020, that was a time, we're all locked down, and George Floyd, it was harrowing, but the internet mobilized. And one of the things that happened on the internet is we all started sharing black squares. I shared a black square. It was like, yes, Black Lives Matter. I am telling all of my Instagram followers that I believe Black Lives Matter. So I should put the black square that everyone else was putting. And the feedback that started coming out after I posted my black square was everyone posting a black square is being performative. They are doing nothing to help the movement. They are blocking out actual resources on how, for people who are in the protests, how they can access, I think it was sites in which they could get supports. I think it was sites in which they could get food, aid supplies. So the black squares were blacking out all the access. The people posting it were just performing their activism and a whole bunch of stuff. So I immediately was like, punch to the guts. I messed up. I did the wrong thing. Let me delete my black square. Now, I didn't have an audience, so no one cared, no one said anything to me, but I was just so conscious of what are other people going to think of me, because I went and did this performative thing. My stance has changed a little bit. So when I was talking about Jenna Kutcher just now, I am more kind of looking at things on a macro lens, so not on a micro lens. I no longer am concerned with, are we being the perfect activist? Am I being the perfect activist? Which is hard, because obviously I don't want anyone to be upset with anything I do. But the thought process that I have now is more along the lines of what is going to achieve the greatest good. And I think, this is my take, it could very well be wrong, but I think that those black squares maybe did a lot for the movement, because they normalized that Black Lives Matter across everyone. So it was no longer just the activists who were super, super involved, which are extremely important for the movement, so I want that on record, but it was no longer just them posting. It was everyone. It was your celebrities. It was, Bob from the bank, who has never spoken about an issue of race in his life, and your child's teacher's friend, people who are just very much not involved in politics. And I think that normalized things to the point at which a lot of people who didn't care about DEI, about racial issues, started to care, and they started to pay attention, and they invested money, resources. I don't have the stats to lay this out. That is just my take, is I'm maybe it wasn't terrible. Maybe normalizing the support isn't a bad thing. And so I take a similar stance with other stuff, which is maybe not being a perfect activist does good for the movement. It's good to show up, even if you're not doing it perfectly, even if you are centering yourself, even if, whatever else you're being criticized for, which I think can come from very valid places, that criticism, but maybe it is still a net positive to the movement. Maybe it is still great because now you are telling all these other powerful people who are your friends that it's okay for them to speak up, that it's time for them to speak up, that you were brave and therefore they should be too. You walked so they could run. I don't know the answers. That's the school of thought that I'm currently sitting with. It's not comfortable for me to be sitting up here. It's not comfortable for me to be talking about showing up as an activist. I sure as hell don't have the lived experience of oppression. I may have proximity to some of it. I grew up in South Africa, the most unequal country in the world. I'm living in the Middle East. Many of the people closest to me are currently have their home country going through a different war, the war in Sudan. So I have seen, what an unjust world this is. Many of the people I care, in fact, the people I care most about, have been deeply, deeply affected by what an unjust world this is. But I am not really. I am white. I come from a pretty middle-class background. I was afforded a great education. I had great parents who pushed me to be critical, and I was afforded social capital. Maybe I'm missing the first world passport. That's maybe the one thing, but I by no means can sit here and say this is my life and experience and therefore I'm an expert. But I don't think that you need to have a lived experience to talk about stuff, because I think that not everyone listens to the people who actually do have the experience, the lived experience. I have seen myself, just in the South African context, going back to student activism, I have seen me be able to change the minds far more effectively of other white people than my black peers, because of whatever racist thoughts those other white people had, that they deemed me smarter and they deemed me someone more worthy of listening to. So yeah, I will show up even if it's imperfectly, and I have all those questions going through my head of, what if I get it wrong? What if people think I'm making it about me? What if I'm too late, too emotional, too privileged to belong in this conversation? And I want to say that there's a way to reframe this. In 50 years, you're asking yourself, what would you regret more? This is, again, the regret minimization framework that I have spoken about here. Would you regret, let's say you want to speak out in support of Palestine. Would you regret posting the wrong thing, but standing for the thing that you care about? So basically not getting it perfect, like Jenna Kutcher, or getting it right by some people's standards, but then still facing hate from people who don't agree with your views. Would you regret that more? Or would you regret staying silent because you were scared of not getting it perfect? So there are the facts. There is what is happening, or what will happen. And counterfactual thinking is employing a mindset technique where you are creating alternative realities and you're playing those out. And I don't know about you, but this has been something really, really helpful for me when framing my choices and what path I want to take or what decisions I'm going to make in my life, is really being able to think of the different outcomes. Okay, so now let's get to the crux of this episode. You care about the world. You care about making a difference in the world. I don't know what your value system is, but I'm assuming if you're listening to this episode that, like me, you care about making positive change in the world, but you don't know where or how to show up in a way that is most beneficial to both everyone around you and yourself, because of course you can't pour from an empty cup, so you need to make sure you're looking after yourself. So I want to talk a little bit on rejection and value systems. In psychology, there is something called self-affirmation theory, and studies like Sherman and Cohen who did the study, show that affirming your own values reduces the psychological threat of criticism. So essentially, what this means is that if you are very, very clear on what you stand for, and this is something I've seen repeatedly through my podcast episodes, is that when people became truly rejection resilient, it's because they really, really cared about the things that they were putting their name on the line for. So if you can get clear on the issues you want to stand for, and what are those? Like, for me, it is social justice. I will take a stand for people being abused. Like that's my hard line. I feel like if people are being abused, and this can be in a micro or a macro level. I come from the most unequal country in the world. I saw plenty of racist white people treat their domestic workers like absolute garbage and underpay them and abuse them. And that is my red line. Like, I will do everything within my power to stop that abuse of power from happening. So if that meant, getting my best friend who's a lawyer to write a legal letter to send to domestic worker so that she can send that to her boss to scare her boss into paying her, that's what I do. That is what I did. What are yours? Yours may not be that. And if it's not that, then I can say that whatever flurry of hate you're going to experience will probably hurt a lot more than if you know that this is a core value. I'm guessing if you listen to this that human rights might be a core value of yours, and it might be something that you feel strongly enough to be ready to withstand some criticism. And if you do, welcome. I support you, and I don't think it's too late. Another thing that I'll say in relation to self-affirmation theory and knowing your values is still have your real people in your corner. So I've mentioned this in episodes before. I was interviewed by Sarah Rice on her podcast, This Changes Everything. And she mentioned in this episode about when she was on MTV's The Challenge. And she said to me that when she faced a flood of online hate, so she turned the screens off, she turned the phones off, and she turned to her community around her. Her neighbors, her brothers, her sisters, the people who knew her, they knew the full complexity of her, and they're really her corner, her safe space. And that is what she relied on to stay strong, to ground herself as she made these moves. And if you need to do that, if you have decided that what is best for you to advocate for your beliefs, your values, is to go and post on social media or write a newsletter or phone your Senate or write for the media or whatever it is, and you can't quite handle all the criticism coming at you right now, then that's okay to turn the screens off. It's okay to take a break. I would just really, really encourage you to find the real human, three-dimensional people that you can touch to support you, to be there with you. It feels tremendously easier to stand for what you believe in when you have people in your corner. That is something that I truly have learned over years, and I believe in, and I think many, many people will agree with me, having people in my corner. I chose my university because it was supposed to be the open-minded, socially progressive space, and my hometown was not that. And it was because I wanted the people in my corner who also believed in the things I did, so that I would argue the only way to truly fill your cup is to have those people in your corner. So in closing, I really just came on here to share some thoughts. I actually had an iPhone app note that was rejection and activism, record a podcast episode on this, because it really was sparked by that whole debate happening on Threads, and how much I think that to chase that perfect outcome, that outcome where we're not going to get rejected, is often the equivalent of not standing for what we believe in. I'm sure there is something that each and every single one of us truly, truly believes in. So maybe some people will call me out in this episode. You are more than welcome to. I welcome it. I stand by what I'm saying. Maybe some people will call this performative. Maybe some people will say that I didn't go far enough. I'm showing up anyway, and maybe you can too. If we all wait until we are perfectly ready and have everything, aligned before we speak up, we might miss the moments where we're needed the most. I believe that rejection is a guarantee in life. I think no matter what way we approach life, we'll be rejected by someone, ourselves or other people. But I also think that holding back on what we care about is a choice. And so my closing statement for you, if you're thinking about what move you want to take, is to remember that the cost of rejection is high, but I truly think that the cost of regrets is higher. So thank you. Thank you for listening to my rejection story. If someone sent you this episode, then I think that you have people in your life who maybe see you too. And I encourage you to maybe send this to a friend who you think could benefit from listening. Thank you so much for being here. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper.